Hey Grandma, so just wanted to get back to you on the questions that you sent me last week about our immune system. Your questions are actually quite timely since flu season is about to kick into full gear and there's a whole bunch of people running around to get their flu shots, and of course our body has its own natural defense system, which is the immune system, to protect against such viruses like the flu. So your first question was, what is cell-mediated immunity? So cell-mediated immunity is when T cells bind to antigen presenting cells and they enter into a type of mediation process. The goal of that mediation is to eliminate harmful pathogens like germs and bacteria from our body. Now, to give you a little bit more detail about T cells originate in our bone marrow and they make their way up to the thymus gland. Now think about the thymus gland as the military, where civilians go to get trained to protect our country against enemies that want to do us harm. Well, T cells go there to be prepared and trained essentially on how to recognize antigens, which trigger an antigen response to eliminate such pathogens. Now, it is quite a process. Only 5% of T cells actually go on to lymph nodes. Those T cells that fail to recognize antigen molecules and bind to them, or bind to them too tightly, actually don't go on to the lymph nodes, which is kind of like grade school. If you're going on to the next grade, depends on taking a test. If you don't pass, you don't go on. Those T cells that don't pass don't go on to the lymph nodes. So that brings me to your next question, which was, what happens in lymph nodes? So lymph nodes are actually part of the larger lymph system, which consists of the lymph vessels and lymph nodes and lymph fluids. And I have a picture here to give you a bit of a visual. Those circular oval type structures are actually the lymph nodes, and the vein-like structures are the lymph vessels. So the lymph vessels circulate the lymph fluid, which is a clear fluid that bathes our body cells with nutrients and water from our blood to keep those cells healthy. Now, they also transport cells that are infected with pathogens to the lymph nodes. Now, think about the lymph nodes as an oil filter for your car. The oil filter for your car filters out impurities and particles that will damage your engine. Well, that's exactly what the lymph nodes do, except they do it via immune cells, which include T cells. So the T cells are in the lymph nodes, and they'll recognize these antigens and bind to them and attack them to eliminate them, including like bacteria and germs and viruses. Now, an important thing about T cells, which relates to your third question, which is, what cytokines do T cells secrete and what do these do? So T cells secrete interleukin-2. Once interleukin-2 is secreted, T helper cells produce receptors which will bind with interleukin-2 to produce clones of that very same T helper cell. So it basically creates clones of T helper cells, which are, more little soldiers to protect against pathogens that are harmful to our body. Now, those T helper cells will actually go on to secrete different types of cytokines to help them specialize in defending against different kinds of pathogens. So think about it like in the military, going back to that analogy, how there's the Navy and the Air Force, and they each specialize in a certain type of defense. The Air Force aerial and the Navy via the sea. So those T helper cells will specialize in protecting, attacking and destroying certain types of pathogens, intracellular pathogens, and pathogens in our gut, pathogens in our lungs, cancers, and things like that. So I hope that gives you a brief overview about our immune system and it answers your questions. And I know you had a few more questions. And also I'll be back in touch with you next week to follow up on those. In the meantime, have a good week, Grandma. Thanks.